Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. My name is Mark Healy, and I'm with Arcadis. I'd like to begin by thanking the University of Illinois for hosting this conference. As a proud graduate of the University of Illinois, it excites me very much to see them taking an active role in this community. Today, I'll be providing an overview and evaluation of fractionation technology for PFAS treatment. Here's a summary that we keep updated on the status of current water treatment technologies for PFAS. Technologies that are well developed and are reasonably feasible are located in the top right corner, and these include granular activated carbon and ion exchange resins. Today we'll be discussing fractionation, which is a technology that is rapidly maturing, and here at Arcadis we believe has the ability to become as feasible as technologies such as GAC and resin. Fractionation is a separation technology that uses various gases to generate bubbles that physically separate PFAS from solution in water. The characteristics of these bubbles very much depend on the gas that is used. Typically, we see air generate bubbles that are 7 millimeters in diameter on average, but the bubbles generated by the use of ozone can be significantly smaller, on the range of a 28 million% surface area increase for the total amount of bubbles generated by the same gas input. And this is because the ozone bubbles generate micro nanobubbles, which typically have an average diameter in the tens of nanometers. Ozofractionation takes advantage of the high surface activity imparted by the fluorocarbon chain to remove these chains from solution on the surface of the bubbles. At Arcadis, we use an ozone fractionation process that has been developed in coordination with Evacra, which is a company out of Australia. Evacra uses a series of columns that are known as ozofractionative catalyzed reagent addition, or OCRA columns, and this process uses ozone microbubbles and a reagent to increase the efficiency of the process and to treat different species of PFAS, including some short chain precursors. Additional foam reduction is also possible via the use of subsequent fractionation chambers and processing of the foam concentrate using what is called an OCRA super concentrating array, or an OSCAR chamber. The volume of foam in a typical fractionation OCRA process is estimated to be less than 1% of the total raw influent, though this will vary greatly depending on the influent water quality. Having a waste generation rate of less than 1% is a great advantage over other treatment technologies, especially those in the separation ballpark. As an example, a system operating at 20% or 20 gallons per minute treats upwards of 10 million gallons per year. A reverse osmosis system treating the same flow could generate more than 1 million gallons of concentrate for treatment, whereas a well-optimized fractionation chamber at a 1% waste generation rate would produce just 100,000 gallons of waste. Fractionation is not a silver bullet, but it is a great tool in the tool belt of PFAS treatment technologies. Treatment trains really are a standard in the industry of PFAS treatment. Here's an example of where fractionation fit into a typical PFAS treatment train. Because fractionation is not only capable of removing PFAS, but also destroying organics, managing solids, and managing odors, there is less need for upstream pre-treatment, as these filters would typically be used to remove solids that are already handled by the fractionation chamber. There is an advantage in having a media polish downstream before the water is discharged, as this significantly increases the lifespan and the performance range of the fractionation chambers. As the fractionation chambers produce foam, this foam can then be loaded onto another media bed that can then be sent for incineration or other disposal technologies, including supercritical water oxidation, which is a technology that we found so far has paired really well with fractionation. Overall, less waste is sent off, as discussed on the previous slide, and so that's really one of the benefits that we're seeing with fractionation. Arcadis's foray into ozofractionation began in 2017 when Arcadis Australia handled a treatment stream that had been impacted groundwater by AFFF, or firefighting foam, and they used ozone in a fractionation chamber as well as a media polish to see removal ranges of 99.96% for total PFAS. In 2019, these promising results led to Arcadis US beginning bench studies to develop our own form of fractionation work here. Over time, in the last 2 years, we have dialed in the setup of our lab and progressed to completion of construction of a mobile pilot fractionation system. The bench scale work is ongoing at our treatability lab in North Carolina, and it currently has been used to handle wastewater, leachate, and AFFF impacted streams. Removal ranges vary depending on which analyte you're looking at, but currently we're seeing 99% for PFOS, 99% for PFNA, and greater than 96% for PFHXS. Now we'll move into how we've progressed our work from the bench scale to the pilot scale. In this case study, we're looking at a project that began in 2019 when Arcadis was hired to do a feasibility study for a landfill site in Michigan. Historically, this site has been a steel finishing operation and had 3 landfills and a treatment lagoon system. It was the county-wide landfill for steel manufacturing waste in a heavily industrial area, and PFAS was discovered in the landfill leachate in 2018. Currently, it has a gravity feed system to a collection sump. This sump is operated using a generator, which increases the total operational costs for the system. There's also currently hauling of the landfill leachate handled by the Michigan Eagle, and this is estimated to have a volume upwards of 20,000 gallons per day at a contract price of 15 cents per gallon, which is the current price, but it is expected to increase over time. Currently, that's $700,000 spent annually just on the disposal of the waste. You can also see on this slide the targets for discharge for the state of Michigan based on Rule 57. These targets are 420 parts per trillion for PFOA and 11 parts per trillion for PFOS. The influent that we received at the bench scale facility in North Carolina had concentrations of PFOA of 430 parts per trillion, so just above the 420 parts per trillion you'd see on the last slide, and PFOS of 190 parts per trillion compared to the 11 parts per trillion on the last slide. Additionally, there were high total suspended solids, TOC, sulfates, and metals, which you can see in our lab data that was collected in December of 2020. The raw leachate was at the treatability lab run through the fractionation column twice to simulate multiple passes that would be used on the pilot scale. Here are the results from our bench scale testing. The test was conducted as a 3.5-hour run, treating about 26 gallons of water with 2 passes that were through 2 columns using ozone as well as air. In both the air and ozone trials, both PFOA and PFOS were treated to non-detect levels which were less than 10 parts per trillion. However, the ozone test generated just 7% total foam volume in comparison to the influent, whereas the air test generated around 25% foam volume. So we're seeing significantly less waste being generated with this trial for ozone in comparison to air as the fractionation gas. The residence time here was pretty conservative at 60 to 90 minutes, but this is also something that can dictate the footprint for our pilot and full-scale operations. We did see that both ozone and air were less effective on short-chain PFAS analytes, but more effective on the longer-chain PFAS analytes, which is kind of what you would expect here. In addition to the bench scale optimization work, we have constructed a mobile pilot system for use on client sites with longer-term operation. It consists of 3 columns, as well as 3 fractionation columns, as well as 1 concentration column in order to handle the foam generated in those first 3 columns. It also has the ability to hold 2 media polish vessels. For this test, we used two of the fractionation columns. The mobile treatment lab also has controls that are used to operate the system, but it does require pretty intensive usage by the operator. So that's currently something that is being optimized. The system is designed to handle 10 gallons per minute max and is also capable of handling quite variable water qualities. In this example, we conducted 4 scenarios of testing. The variables used here were the gas used in the first column, being air or ozone, as well as the inclusion of pretreatment. We tracked the volumes of waste generated by the final column all throughout this testing. Final concentrated waste ratios were under 5% in all tests, with the exception of the first test. For every 100 gallons of raw influent going in, we saw less than 5 gallons of foam is what this means. If you go back to our site conditions, where we estimated that 20,000 gallons of waste are currently being hauled off site, that means that we're going to see moving forward an estimate of 1,000 gallons a day being hauled or being managed. That could, as we discussed earlier, that could be loaded onto media for incineration rather than the typical hauling that's being conducted at the moment. The target compounds for this pilot test were PFOA and PFOS. And if you'll remember from previous slides, these targets were 420 parts per trillion for PFOA and 11 parts per trillion for PFOS. All tests displayed removal below these targets, and varying operating conditions showed consistent removal after just the first fractionation column. After the second fractionation column, we saw all tests below the non-detect level. The resin polish was used as a final safety net, in addition to proof of concept moving into the full-scale design. We would expect that longer performance times would be seen by maintaining this resin base. And a final cost-benefit analysis is currently in progress with the client to review our results and to confirm what we have seen here for moving forward into final design.
3 minutes remaining.
Thank you. In conclusion, what we have seen so far is that fractionation is a rapidly developing technology that we expect to mature into something that can compete with granular activated carbon and ion exchange resins, as well as reverse osmosis due to its ability to generate a lower waste ratio. We've also seen that our bench scale testing has been optimized well over the 2 years of testing that we have conducted, and that the mobile pilot treatment system that has been constructed has been effective in the limited testing so far. We're looking to establish several more relationships with other clients in the next few years to test this further and begin to optimize for the full-scale development that we have already seen with Arcadis Australia. Thank you again, and please feel free to reach out to me with any further questions. I'd also like to acknowledge the work done by our PFAS treatment team in the industrial and leachate handling field, as well as our treatability lab, our clients in Michigan, and our colleagues in Australia. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Mark. We do have time for one question.
Excellent, and we do have one question. Have you tested other gases to form the microbubbles?
So currently, no. The gases that have been tested in the United States have been air and ozone, but I believe that is on the back of significant looking into of other research that's been conducted in universities and with other firms. And ozone had really shown to be the one that we had found to be the most promising. And so that's really what has been the basis of our research moving forward.